Paul Dietrich from Fairfax Global Markets is still with us. And Paul, I want to understand the market impact because we've seen a painful sell-off over the last 7 sessions, and that's just kind of making investors very edgy and nervous. I was reading a Goldman Sachs report which has highlighted how, cascading of things further from here would result in a 10% sell-off for the U.S. market and an underlying economic impact of nearly 1%. They're, of course, accounting for how auto tariffs can be brought into the fold and the remaining $300 billion also being hit by tariffs. So they're accounting for the total damage. But we've already fallen about 6.5% for the U.S. markets from the top. How much more damage can we see?
Well, again, you have to, we saw today the markets drop, and 80% of the stocks on the U.S. stock exchange, have little to no exposure with China. Now, most of the big stocks, the Dow stocks, they do, but even they are not. There are a few that are going to get hurt, but most of it, I've tried to analyze what the 10% tariffs have done to the U.S. economy, and I see almost no effect. And, the stock market goes up and down, and I think once people think through what's actually happening, the stock market will go back up again, because a lot of companies were hurt today who really have no exposure to China. But even with the 10% tariffs, the average person is only paying about of the 10%, they're only paying about 3% of it. When China, when those tariffs came in, China kind of manipulated their currency down so that the dollar went up, and that allowed China and the exporters to take a little of the sting out of the 10% tariffs. And then the tariffs are only on the wholesale costs, not on the retail costs. So in the end, what people are paying at Walmart and, other stores for Chinese-made goods is only about a 3% tax, and Americans are paying that, but we've seen no impact on the U.S. economy. We had 3.2% GDP growth. The underlying consumer spending seems to be going forward. If consumer spending isn't being hurt and GDP isn't being hurt, then the tariffs were having no impact. They also made food prices go down because of the tariffs that the Chinese put on food products. So, all in all, that offsets some of the 3% that the people were paying. I think with 25% tariffs, you're going to be seeing about an 8% of that is going to be paid by the consumers in the United States. And we'll see whether that has any impact on consumer spending. Again, I think that this is going to be rectified by the time 6 weeks from now when the G20 summit comes. So there's going to be very little impact. But if it doesn't get rectified, then we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's really about if it doesn't get rectified and if we get another date after the G20 when things will be postponed and, kicked down the road, essentially. Paul, thanks very much for taking out the time and thanks very much for joining us with your insights.